Are we all sitting comfortably? Shall I now begin? Hello and welcome to the Testing Peers. Thank you for joining us. This week we are going to do a little podcast and we're going to talk about measurement, measuring, measure, the M word. Joining us, we have a special guest. So I'll start with introducing them. So, hello, Tara.
Hello.
I'm joined by some of our season regulars. So, David, say hello.
Hello.
And Chris.
Good day, good sir.
And I'm Russell. So I just want to say thank you to our sponsors. So Saffron QA continue to be our sponsors, and they've been supporting us and the testing community. Therefore, if any of our listeners would be in the market for a new job, or they perhaps are hiring new talent themselves for their teams, please reach out to Ben at Saffron QA. He can be contacted via email at ben@saffronqa.co.uk. So we've got a special guest, so we've got a special bit of banter. Take it away.
Well, I know that you guys have the Testing Peers conference literally days away from when this comes out. I unfortunately cannot make it all the way over to the UK, so living vicariously, what is your favorite or least favorite part of conferences? Ooh, a lot of thinking faces. I didn't think that would be a hard question.
There's answers, but I was just thinking
There's
about.
answer.
I mean, I think people is the answer to both of those in some ways,
That's fair.
because I love being around people that I love, and I've met many wonderful humans at conferences. I've engaged, I've learned, networked, spent some wonderful moments with them, made friends for life. But also sometimes people kind of ruin conferences for you.
Or the social battery gets way,
Well, they
way
can
low.
they can be too much people, just overwhelmingness, but also people can sometimes do things that you would suggest perhaps would contravene certain codes of conduct, or things quite rude moments, and that can put a real dampener on a conference experience also.
I think that's pretty fair.
I was going to say something similar, but again, people, I think some of the good things for me is when I've spoken at conferences, just feeling that, the nervousness beforehand and then actually getting on stage and then having people listen to you and embrace what you're actually saying and feel really positive about that. And I would echo Chris's thing, sometimes people do spoil it with their actual behavior. And I think that's what is the worst bit about that.
I like that nervous moment too. I get so nervous right before I speak at a conference, but there's just such an outpouring of support that it's hard to not get over it.
Yeah, totally.
I'm going to do a different theme then. I think we might already guess where I might be going. So the positives and negatives, I guess the positives are actually if you're organizing or creating a event or conference, seeing it successful, seeing people enjoying it, people getting taken away from it, I think is an incredible experience, feeling, that you achieved something that's helped or added to the community that we all, I think, feel part of. We all want to help. I think the negative of that is the strain, the stress, the pressures, and I feel for every organizer, every event out there. This is not just us putting on an event, the logistics, the trying to get as good as it can be with the effort as a side hustle or a side job, the sponsors, the other people that make it, getting tickets, revenues, the strain is quite large, putting programs on, and dealing with the last minute changes of anything that you have a schedule on. People are a most important part of it, and sometimes they have to decline at the last minute because of personal situations and having to reflect and adapt. It's extra strain. So that's kind of my side of this equation.
Oh, absolutely.
So I look forward to it, kind of loathe it at the same time.
Yes. So when you're out visiting the Testing Peers conference, buy these guys a beer. They might need it by then.
Probably give me a hug if I'm not crying in the corner.
Yes, absolutely.
What about you, Tara?
I really love the people aspect of it. So often working remotely, it is the only not computer screen human contact I get. And having those little hallway conversations is by far my favorite part. But when it comes to the least favorite, my social battery drains really quickly, and then I end up with a lot of FOMO because I wanted to go to that thing tonight that everybody's going to, but if I don't, go back to my hotel or take a nap or whatever the case may be. Nobody will necessarily want me there because I will be cranky. So I have to play that balancing act of too much people, reminding myself that I can't go to every talk, I can't do every workshop because I want to do all the things, and it's rough.
I developed a habit in the last couple multi-day conferences I've attended where I managed to lose my voice around the midway point as well. That's probably good for other people, but for me it feels a bit negative.
And it's especially bad if you lose your voice, but then you're speaking like tomorrow.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for that, guys. I hope you have the best time and take lots of pictures for all of us that can't get there. But if you get there, please say hi to everybody for me. Buy your tickets. Buy an extra ticket so I can put it in my name. I don't know.
Well, and maybe hopefully if we're not all dead and we invite more people, we could potentially try and do PeersCon 2. But let's wait for that post retrospective.
Yeah, Russell's not ready for that yet. Shh.
Yeah. The trauma's real, people. Let's survive first and then talk about the future after the survival.
If you're anything like me, Russell, right up to the event, I get like, what the heck was I thinking? This was the dumbest idea. I'm not going to survive this. And then right afterwards, I'm like, we should start planning the next one.
Yeah, to be fair, I think it would be a positive thing. As much as I kind of fear some of this, I think it is kind of, it's just that final nerves. It's like when you talk from speaking, it's just those nerves of trying to make it the best and make everyone happy. It's always hard. And the reality is you can't make everyone happy. You've got to make it the best you can do. So we were going to talk about measurements. So who wants to start us off? Whose inspirational idea was this that maybe wants to a little bit explain a bit more about how we're going to look into this?
Yeah, Chris, whose inspirational idea was this?
Oh, inspiration is a word that you certainly use when I'm about. Yeah. So have you ever come across people saying you need to have a measure of success on this thing? Maybe it's an annual objective and somebody's gone, smart objectives, buddy, or where they've said, we've decided that all green doesn't mean good, but what does success mean with our testing? What about individuals that we report to? What is successful? How do we actually measure what good looks like? Because I feel like in a world that not everything is so easily quantifiable, and we've got some things that are more qualitative than quantitative. Don't ask me to say that too many times. Sometimes finding that way to measure things is a bit more tricky.
Yeah, and what works for one audience, i.e. your C-suite, is probably not going to work for your direct team who looks at some of those numbers and goes, okay, so.
Context, perhaps.
So to answer your question, Chris, no, I've never been asked to measure anything.
I don't believe you.
It's always a struggle when you have to measure something, right? Because I feel like measurements and goals get convoluted a lot of times. And when something becomes a goal, it's no longer a measurement. And I think that's one of the things that I struggle with the most is when we say, okay, let's start measuring code coverage because somebody somewhere really wants to know our code coverage. And then it becomes a goal to have, 80%, 90% gold code coverage. Well, now it doesn't mean anything.
I think the purpose of measurements is to add value somewhere. Yes, I said the V word. Because as you said, Tara, if you're just counting numbers of things that have passed, actually they can be just the simple stuff that just goes, does it have an A in it? Does it, whatever? And counting those sort of things doesn't actually add value. Whereas actually you need to be able to measure whether you have done, made it valuable, done the verification and the validation in order so that it is a useful tool for whatever's being the creation of whatever project you're actually working on. Any measurement needs to add value to the end user, be it the C-suite, be it the engineer working on it day to day, because they need to be able to have buy-in to that and see a difference and have an effect on that as well.
Well, and by that, I know for me, my dashboards are almost always changing, and it does drive some people crazy because the things that we found value in last month or last sprint are absolute rubbish now, and no one cares about that anymore.
Would you suggest, therefore, that another word to use is relevant?
I do like that. Yeah.
And that's the problem sometimes with what maybe we would paint as a traditional approach to things, is that traditional things are built on solid foundations that don't really change. And maybe in a more fluid environment that accepts changes in context that you might call agile, what is relevant, what does provide value, could perhaps change often.
I like the graceful sidestep nearly of the word agile. You got it there.
It's difficult though, because we genuinely do need to know if what we're doing, if what we're trying to achieve is actually being met. It just happens that sometimes that measure isn't something that is particularly easy to quantify. I know we've had conversations before about what is quality, and that's different in the eye of the beholder and those people, just in the same way as finding something attractive or finding something you love or finding something you hate. We have all different flavors. We are all different personas. And the difficulty with the measures is, to your point earlier, Tara, is it's a different audience will care about a different outcome. And sometimes they don't have time to hear the granular nuances. Sometimes they have lots of cognitive biases, or sometimes they're hearing from one team this thing over here, but this team who in their heads are kind of a similar cost center of similar people, they should be measuring things the same, but it's not that easy, is it? And that can be a really, the difficulty of communicating that to different audiences, that's a skill right there.
Yeah, I think I find myself quite often having to sell the value of a particular thing, that I need to keep track of this for my work, so let me tell you why it's important to you. It doesn't always work, of course, because sometimes they just don't care about the things that you do. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of salesmanship and marketing involved in keeping track of all of the things that are actually going to get you to your end goal, and still making everybody else happy and giving them the information they need as well.
Making everybody happy. That's an interesting goal.
Well,
pay them money.
Nobody here's a taco. You can't make everybody happy.
Russell drops the M word, money. And even in that world, there's a point of sort of immediacy, short-term gains versus long-term gains. Like, what is the game that you're playing? Are you trying to get things doing so you buy yourself a mid to late 30s Peyton Manning to win yourself a Super Bowl, but as soon as he retires, you're the Denver Broncos, so you ain't going to win again for a long time. That happens.
You went there.
I am a Broncos fan. I'm feeling that pain right now, just FYI. But it's the same thing, isn't it? It's, you get too excited to invest in something that doesn't have long-term benefits.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we tend to get a little bit of blinders too, because we all set our goals at the beginning of the year. And then 3 months in, 6 months in, you're like, what was I thinking? This is a horrible thing to measure, and now I'm stuck measuring it because it's on my charts and everybody else is looking for it. It's, now we're stuck with this makeup for the next however long. But Russell, I think it was you and I that were talking, gosh, almost a year ago now, when you were talking about specifically bringing value and the things that you measure for your team, and how it's kind of a I'm trying to I can't remember exactly how you put it, but I love the outlook that you have with your teams about measuring things. And I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought there because I'm trying to remember it. But the way that you look at measuring value was particularly enlightening to me. So how do you deal with it on your team?
I wish I remembered as well now. A year ago, I'd probably be in different teams to what I am now, to be quite honest with you.
That's super valid.
Long-term output here, though, is that Russell is wise about things, if you don't remember why.
It obviously made a
I'll take
big
that.
impact on me, even if I can't remember the details of it. So that's the big takeaway there. Is Russell's brilliant.
I'll take all the compliments. I can't lie. If I'm honest with you, I can't remember. It's interesting. I guess my head right now is thinking sort of macro, micro. It's kind of thinking about measuring things at the right level. You mentioned code quality and other things like that. It's actually, are we measuring things at the level to have the impact on the thing that matters? The value, I think David's term before. And actually the value is quality software. Then coverage doesn't necessarily equate to value because it depends on what you've covered. So we sometimes start looking at the micro, thinking it's going to tell us something at the macro level, and now I'm going to get my tongue twisted. So we've got to make sure that we kind of put appropriateness. Now I'm a big fan of DORA and the sort of DevOps research and assessment kind of metrics, because they look at the bigger picture rather than team and the micro level, like how much your test coverage is, how fast your tests run. They take into account all of it to help build a team that's delivering software of value fast with reliability, sustainability. And those that haven't sort of done any DevOps or seen or heard of Dora, I guess there is kind of Dora.dev, I think is the website, and you can find lots of information on it. But it's kind of 4 key measurements that you can do in detail and be highly accurate, or you can just go for a gut feel and see where you're doing and if you're getting better. Because measuring trends are sometimes far more important than measuring exact numbers. Are you trending better or worse? Are you learning or are you making errors? You're still learning from that error, but do you need to change? Do you need to pivot again? Do you need to try something different? And measurements to me are all about kind of giving you insights to make better choices at the right scale. Now, if I'm in a Scrum team, what is that scale? Might be different. If I'm a head of management, head of engineering, might be different again. So it's all about trying to work out what brings value that doesn't bring waste. Because if we all said measure how many bugs you raise, we can all guess what's going to happen next. You raise every little tiny bug, no matter what, and you raise it separately. Every time you do a different step to get the same outcome, it's a different bug. You drive the wrong behaviors with measurements that are wrong. So it's all about trying to make sure your measures drive accurate behaviors and figuring out what behaviors you want to drive.
And also, is, as you've mentioned there, it's being brave enough to pivot, recognize soon enough that the measurements that you're taking isn't giving value or isn't giving you the right results or isn't giving the right impression for whatever you're testing, and being able to go, right, let's move it, whatever, because Tara said, we're stuck with them for the year. It's brave to go, no, we're not stuck for them for a year. These aren't working. We need to change them. And this is how. So find a solution.
I know that I've definitely been on a couple of teams that have what would be considered dream metrics. They've got the dashboards, they've got everything being tracked, they've got trends, but nobody looks at them.
Oh, yeah, the wonderful world where someone's got on a big pile of work. They've defined measures, they've defined strategies, they've defined standards. They've put a loads of good work on it and it's been signed off. And then guess how many people follow those standards?
Yes.
DOA.
Dead on arrival?
Yeah, you realize that there's these reports that have been sitting there for years that nobody's even opened up, and you're like, did you know this has been crashing for this long? Did you know that you've been trending downwards since last August? Or, because nobody actually looks at or is using those measures because it's been fine. We've been fine, right?
I just see a picture of a dog sitting in a building right now on a chair. I think the meme that gets used all the time. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's burning
fine.
around you.
I've got a question. It's to do with AI. Do you think that you can use AI to come up with measurements? I frame this by the fact that could we use AI to get away from the sort of human biases, potentially, if we feed the data in and use it to come up with measurements?
As long as that data, it knows what good and bad is, which probably is being informed by a human. And if that doesn't take place, then Skynet's coming and we're all doomed. But I view AI often as a tool that can greatly benefit and enable us to optimize things. But just like with automation, it does require little nudges in the right direction, little bit of sort of checking in what's going on here, and not always taking everything verbatim. There's a lot of power in what can be done, but it's only as powerful as the inputs and the value of the outputs, right? It's all inputs and outputs, and I think there's great power to be there and to be leveraged with AI. Just like I don't think automation is replacing the role of the tester, I think it's there to enable us to do more of the human stuff so it can go and do some of that other stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a role for it. One of the things that I've been really kind of finding myself going down rabbit holes for in regards to AI has been the right AI tool for the right job, right? Like, would I ask ChatGPT to come up with these things? Probably not. But would I find another tool that might be really good at trend analysis or something along those lines? Because, not everybody has a degree in mathematics that can sit there and go, oh yeah, let me plot that out for you and show you what the trends look like. So I think there's a right tool for everything that you need. And making sure to take the time to find something that's actually going to fill those needs, bring the value and the measurements that you need is going to be, I don't know, it might be the hardest part because there's so many AI things out there right now.
Same's true with any tools though, right? There's a
Yeah.
plethora of options. Sometimes it's hard to see the wood for the trees because there's just so many options out there. And actually, often we find ourselves being dictated by tooling vendors about what good looks like rather than ourselves, which is interesting when you think about it. Because what do they know about me?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing about tools and things like that. And I think there's another aspect to measurement is the trust element, the trust that you're measuring the right thing, but also trusting the data you're getting back, that you have confidence in it. And that's a really big thing. And that follows on from the trusting the tool.
Yeah.
How much do you know about the tool? How many people have used the tool in, how many companies? They always like the buzzwords of have used our tool. But actually, as you say, they probably used it in a different way to how we use it. So therefore, their measurements may be absolutely fantastic, but actually, where's the trust that what I'm getting back in my measurements are what I need and what's
True of the
useful to
ways
me
that we
and my
work
clients.
as well, right? So I remember working in a company that had a total of 5 Scrum teams that were thinking, I think maybe we should be looking at the Spotify model or some sort of scaled agile. And like we were big enough for all being in the same room. You know?
Yep. Yeah. I've worked on those teams too, where you're like, there's 10 of us. We don't we don't need to be that big.
Yeah, well, it's same with like your world's #1 agile tool. If you're all in the same room the whole time, post-it notes on a wall can be absolutely perfect. Like it's context. Measuring stats is always very interesting with uptime and downtime. I was going to say the world of the music sales in the UK when they did singles, it changed because there's something called music streaming that exists these days. But in the old days, you had to go out and actually buy a single, right? And for a very long time in the UK, they didn't measure any streaming stats. It was all just physical purchases of singles. And so the numbers for #1s were hitting record lows, which would make it seem like the industry was doing terrible and the world hates music. But actually, that wasn't what was actually happening. As a fun fact for you all, listener, the last #1 to not consider streaming sites was Orson's No Tomorrow.
Resident music buff. I think there's something to be said about the way that we've so rapidly changed over the last year that if you're looking at your testing stats and you have really great trends and background information about everything you've done manually for the last 10 years, but all of a sudden you've swapped to automation, like it completely changes that context. Yeah, we might be failing thousands of more tests, but you're also running thousands more tests. So is that to freak out? You gotta have that storytelling behind it and keep in mind exactly where it's coming from and what's shifted in that perspective. And when you're doing that in the middle
What about the fragility of burn down or velocity charts in teams?
Oh yeah.
A team knows its perfect velocity when everything has the right number of people with the right amount of availability that is the same sort of forever.
What is that like?
And the team composition never changes. People don't take leave or anything.
Oh, and this is hypothetical world. Got it. I don't think I've ever been in a place that had that level of consistency for more than a month. Somebody's always sick or out or pulled onto another project or you name it. So a lot of those things that we track and consider statistics, I'm like, I do have a math degree. I know that statistics can be completely made up and interpreted as you need. So, 4 out of 5 dentists recommend, but we had to queue 50 dentists to get that 4 out of 5. So can I make it look like we're doing a really great job with the data that I have? Yeah. Can I make it look realistic? Yeah.
You reminded me of another musical statistic that I read once where Avril Lavigne's team had her YouTube videos on loop so that her stats look better.
Oh, that's sneaky tricky.
Sneaky tricky indeed. Because you get monetization as well as higher numbers and stats and things. Now, I'm sure YouTube's team did change things eventually because same IP, same account, so on and so forth. but originally that wasn't the case. And actually, we've talked a little bit about the wrong goals, like number of bugs and things. There's gamification that comes a lot of the time with these measurements, and the danger of the wrong metric is incredible. It's dangerous to measure nothing, but it's dangerous to measure the wrong thing. Possibly more dangerous, right?
I think so. That's where it comes back to that, we're measuring a goal. Well, if we're always hitting their goal, then our measurements always look fine. But is that really the case?
There's also the case of, because you're measuring something, therefore you put all your eggs in one basket, and you look at that particular metric and think everything's absolutely hunky-dory. Look, I've got, like you say, green ticks everywhere. Whereas actually, if you scratch the surface, there might be many different problems with what you're doing, but you're concentrating on the one goal because that's the one that everyone's being measured on, or whatever. That's where your end of year bonus is coming on. So therefore you put all your efforts into that to make that look good and forget everything else.
But you mentioned earlier, trusting the things that we're measuring, trusting the data that's going into them, trusting the data that comes out. And I am that person. I have high enough anxiety levels that if I see something coming across all green, I immediately go, oh God, what happened here? What did I miss? What data went in wrong? Something went wrong. We missed something, because nobody's perfect. No system is perfect, right? And it might be something that's as simple as a UX problem that you never anticipated because you don't have anybody on your team that uses a screen reader, or some random edge case that I never thought somebody would come in and try to submit this field 50 times in 30 seconds, but here we are. And so I always come from the assumption that when things look good, there's something happening under the surface that means that we need to delve a little bit deeper.
And that again can come with when I've seen places where folks have been so terrified of having repetitive failures in tests that they've just deleted the tests, removed them from the test runs. Oh, that one always fails. We'll remove it from the report so it still looks good.
Yes. It happens a lot with the UI side of things, right? It's a flaky test, so we'll just remove it.
And it damages trust between the test and others, right? Russell's about to speak.
Been silent for a while, but the word of flaky test just does my kind of pulse. More often than not, my experience of flaky tests is environmental or issues with things. It's part of the test dealing with the environment. I just find some terms to be non-helpful. And I guess flaky test is one of them, because actually it's often not the test, it's the environment, the data, stability of it. It could well be badly written tests, but 9 times out of 10, a test runs through the same thing in the same way. It's the thing it's running on that behaves differently more often than not.
Yes.
So horrible word. Sorry, I had to just be annoying.
No, I appreciate it. I saw your eye twitch just a little there.
And on that front, I tried and was told I was never going to succeed, but I figured I'd try again just to mention that the test hasn't failed. When you go and sit an examination to, in schooling and you don't pass the test, it's the you that doesn't pass the test. It's not the test that has failed. And the same is true. The test reveals a failure in the subject of the test, unless the test that was written was utter garbage, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's right up there with, if a test can't be failed, is it really a test? Right? When you start adding that into your measurements and you're thinking, wow, I only have half of these tests that are actually
we could lean down into
tests.
toxic positivity now.
That's another whole episode. I think we maybe have mentioned 2 episodes, and I think that's a good place to actually stop. We are out of time, as it were, and so because I've been measuring the time.
I was going to say, you're measuring it,
yeah. So thank you very much for another great discussion. Thank you, Tara, for being our co-host today, and to Russell and Chris. Thanks to Saffron QA for sponsoring us. We look forward to anyone who's coming to the conference this coming week. I think there may still be chance if you book your ticket now. You can order lunch and everything. I think I don't know what the deadline is for that. It's probably early this week in order to be able to come to the conference.
We'll find a way.
We will find a way. So if you want to buy a ticket, then please do. And we'll look forward to seeing you in Nottingham. If you're not able to make it to the conference, then please do reach out to us. We're available by email at contactus@testingpeers.com. You can reach out to us on most of the social networks. Most likely LinkedIn is where you're likely to get the biggest reply. If you did want to get tickets for the conference, then go to the website of testingpeerscon.com in order to get your tickets and all the details and the fantastic speakers we've got. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for the great conversation, and we'll welcome you back in a couple of weeks' time.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.